Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I am your host, MGCovers. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. We do this podcast live on YouTube every Monday morning. So if you're watching this live, greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. And also if you're listening on Spotify or Apple iTunes, glad you took the time out of your busy schedule in today's crazy world to listen to this podcast. All right, so we got a lot to cover. It was a wild weekend. And again, it's always fun doing these on Monday because we can perfect timing for football season because we can talk about college football. We can talk about NFL. So go ahead and give you the outline of the podcast today. We're going to talk about NFL right out the gate. We're going to talk about handicapping QBs. And also, I'm going to give you probably the most undervalued stat in the NFL that nobody talks about. So a little bit about NFL modeling, and then we'll kind of wrap it up talking about college football. We'll tell you how we came out with college football this weekend, and also dive into the success we're having with soccer. So let's dive into this. We'll pull up the results from NFL. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about NFL, this is wild. You had 6 teams in NFL that were 0-2 going into yesterday. Colts, Giants, Titans, Panthers, Ravens, Rams. So now what's interesting about that, this seems like a given maybe, but what happens if a team is 0-2? And we've talked about this a lot if you follow me regularly. What we're always looking for is what's overvalued and what's undervalued. So if a team is 0-2, they're going to be extremely undervalued, right? Because books set lines based on not statistical data, they set the lines based on market perception. And overall, if a team is 0-2 to start the NFL season, they're perceived to be, quote, a bad team, right? But that's not the case. And we saw that yesterday. So let's go through these. Colts, 0-2, beat the Bears. Now, granted, Colts were a favorite in that game, -2. Giants plus 6.5 on the road at Cleveland, won outright. And we'll talk about winning outright and covering it here in a second. And what's interesting about that line, the public that line was opened at 6.5, never moved off that 6.5. So again, when a line doesn't move like that, it generally, line movement wise, it favors the favorite, but line movement was wrong in that situation. Titans, Packers. Titans were -3 in that one, so Titans lost that one. Panthers, I think that was probably the biggest surprise, and we'll talk about this with Andy Dalton, the quarterback, who had an incredible game. Plus 5.5, win outright on the road against the Raiders. Ravens, playing on the road against Dallas, won. I mean, they were basically blowing Dallas out. Dallas had a late comeback. They still hung on the win. And you had Rams with another comeback. They were 0-2-1. Broncos upset the Bucs, and that was another blowout win. See if we can pull that one up. Yeah, Denver just basically blew Tampa out 26-7. So the point is, a couple takeaways from that, and this is real important. And we'll switch gears and come back and make this point. If you were building a model, and that's basically what I do is build models. I'm a model guy, which is a bottom up, not a top down. We don't use a lot of line movement. If somebody was building a model for, say, Major League Baseball or NHL or one of these sports that has a long season, and you said, hey, this model's not working, it's a losing model, I would ask you, what's your sample size? And if you told me the sample size is 2 games, I would laugh because I would say, bro, that's a extremely small sample size. And there's no way for a sample size of 2 games to have any kind of validity. And that's the point to be made about NFL. So everybody, myself, sharps, amateurs, everybody's operating off a 2-game sample size, which is extremely insignificant and hard to draw any kind of conclusions off of that sample size. Yet, what will generally happen is those 0-2 teams to start the season will be extremely undervalued. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 7 teams that were 0-2, all of them won, but one of them. You kind of write this down and make notes for next year is don't overreact to an 0-2 team ever. Because, boy, let me give you some actual statistical data. Teams that are 0-2 and they're playing a 1-1 team in week 3, they have hit 70% ATS since 2010. So the actual number is 35-15-1 ATS. That means if a team hasn't won any games and they're playing a 1-1 team in week 3, they've gone 35-15 ATS. And then when you start to put the pieces of the puzzle together, that shouldn't be surprising to those of you that are educated, because what happens to an 0-2 team, they're going to shade the line against them. So that's going to therefore create more points and more value on the 0-2 side. All right. So extremely fascinating. But again, a two-game sample size is not significant enough to draw any kind of conclusions. Same deal if a team was 2-0. All right, handicapping QBs. And this is important. I think the public got it right and missed it on a few of these. I think they got it right with Carolina. So Bryce Young was, out. They had basically benched him for Andy Dalton. And go ahead and give you a tip when you're handicapping QBs, and let's say a quarterback gets injured, or in the situation we had this week with a lot of quarterbacks, Tua was out, Jordan Love was out for Green Bay. If you're handicapping that QB, the best thing to do is handicap those quarterbacks as average, right? Meaning I don't necessarily think that you can take away points because they're playing a quarterback. They're not playing their starter. In the case with the Panthers, it was an upgrade. And Andy Dalton had just a field day, had an incredible game. I think he threw for, 3 touchdowns, well over 200 yards. Now, what's interesting, let me show you some stats here, some actual statistical data with Green Bay. Let me pull this up, because this is an important note to note about coaching change that will affect your handicapping. And we're going to look at this Green Bay game. All right, cool. You can see it on the screen. Okay, Green Bay wins 30-14. Now, Jordan Love was not playing this game. They were playing their backup. Willis for Green Bay. So if you can see, look at his stats there, right? Everybody can see that Willis was 13-19, 202 yards, 1 touchdown. Not that impressive, right? But here's the deal with NFL coaches. Remember, these guys are professionals, right? Never lose sight of like the way you evaluate it when you're looking, they're playing their starters out. They've got this backup in here that doesn't have any experience. I'm going to fade this team. You can't necessarily do that. Why? These NFL coaches are very smart individuals. That's why they're coaching in the NFL. And a lot of times you'll see this, and we can look at the box score to prove my point. They will adjust their coaching style. So the game plan more than likely for Green Bay, for Willis, was, hey, do not make mistakes. Do not turn the ball over. And look at the rushing yards for Green Bay. And then look at the rushing yards for Tennessee. Green Bay, 37 carries for 188 yards. They were going to ground and pound the ball. So the game plan was what? Let's chew up the clock. Let's run so that we don't put our quarterback in a bad situation where he's in a lot of third and longs, right? This takes a lot of pressure off him. Maybe we can get some turnovers. And I think, let's see, did Tennessee? Yeah, he had 2 picks there. Levis for Tennessee, 26-34. So they took all the pressure. So they basically adjusted. Very smart coaching job with Green Bay there. So point and the takeaway from that is a lot of times when you have a backup quarterback coming in, I don't necessarily think that you can take off points or devalue that team because they're using a backup, because they're going to adjust how they approach the game, right? So if they got a quarterback doesn't have a lot of experience, they don't want to put him in a lot of third and longs. They're going to try to run the ball, ground and pound it. put themselves give themselves a chance to win that game, and that's exactly what Green Bay did. So super fascinating. So don't forget that too, is that, you're going to adjust to something you see, an injury, and this happens in the NBA as well. A star player in the NBA goes out, the line moves against them hard. Well, it's not like they're going to go up in the grandstands and get some amateur to come in and replace that NBA player. He's going to be replaced by another really good professional basketball player. So again, we've talked about this too, about the public line move. A lot of times the public's going to get it wrong in these situations. All right. Next important, fascinating point about NFL, and you follow me for any length of time, you already know this is true. Favorites won week 1 of the NFL season 12-4. The reason you couldn't put much stock into that is that the NFL is a money line sport disguised as a spread sport. And it's basically an underdog sport. And let's pull this up so you can see it. Yeah, now you've often heard me talk about trends. I hate using the word trends. I like using what we call statistical properties. Take a look at that top figure. Favorites win 60% of the time outright in NFL. However, if we scroll down a little bit, we'll see that against the spread, favorites only covering 47% of the time. So if you play a majority of favorites in the NFL, you will lose. Somebody says, I wouldn't even need to see anybody's betting log. If they told me I play a majority of favorites in NFL, I would say, well, you probably have a losing record. And that's correct. So in week 2, look what happens. Underdogs cover 8 games. And in this week, they covered 7. And what do we know about teams that cover? If they cover, there's an 80% chance they're going to win outright. And so you had 7 dogs this week won outright. And again, I've said that a million times. It's one of those things I think that people, it's such a fact about sport, but yet you don't hear a lot of people talk about it. Teams that win cover 80% of the time. So if you're going to play a dog, and I tweeted this out this morning, I actually read what I tweet. I'll read what I actually tweeted out, because I think the way I said it was really good. Percentage of teams that won and covered yesterday, 100%. Again, that doesn't happen every week, because majority of the time it's going to average 80%. So if you took the points on the dog, you wasted money. Playing money line would have saved you money. So if you played a team, let me give you an example. Let's say you played, let me find one that makes sense. You had so many dogs win yesterday. All right, so Miami, for example. So if you took Miami +4, it was wasted. I mean, +4, whatever the juice was, you lost that juice minus 1.08 units. Or if you play handicap NFL the way I teach, wager the way I teach, you'd have played them on the money line. So you would have lost less. And that's something people don't talk about. So you add that up, meaning if you're going to play dogs in NFL, it's best to play them on the money line. Okay? Those that took the points, you left money on the table by not playing the money line. And let's pull that up. Let me pull up these. Yep, you can see it on the screen. Let's pull up the money lines. Giants cash, and we'll just use bookmaker. Giants cash +230. Green Bay cash +148. Philadelphia cash +124. Minnesota cash +110. Denver cashed +211. Carolina cashed +207. Rams cash with a late comeback +230. NFL's a money line dog sport, and those add up. So what I'm saying is, if somebody was successful in sports in NFL handicapping, and I could look at their betting log, and they just played spreads, and they were successful enough, say they were hitting like 54%, maybe even 55%, and they just played spreads, they would almost double their ROI by simply converting those dog spreads into money lines. It's just a statistical fact about NFL. All right. Going to give you a really, really helpful tip with building models for NFL. All right. So the number one, I don't know if I can pull that up. Let's look at the standings first off. All right. This is NFL standings. We're going to go through this. I'm going to give you the top 5 defenses in the NFL year to date as of right now. Pittsburgh, Minnesota, LA Chargers, Seattle, and New Orleans. And we'll go through this so you can actually see it. All right, so the number 1 defense in the NFL, Pittsburgh, 3-0. Number 2 defense in the NFL, Minnesota. Minnesota's record, 3-0. The third best defense in the NFL is the LA Chargers. Chargers' record is 2-1. The fourth best defense in the NFL, Seattle Seahawks. Seattle's record, 3-0. And the fifth best defense in the NFL, the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans Saints record is 2-1. Now watch this. If we add up the record of the top 5 defenses in the NFL, 13-2. So do you think that defense is undervalued in the NFL? If you answered yes to that question, you are 100% correct. Defense is extremely undervalued in NFL. And probably what's overvalued might be quarterback play to some degree, offense to some degree, but defense is extremely, extremely undervalued. And again, like I've always said, and if you're a stat model client, I'm going to send this out. And a potential stat model client, I have an email list. If you want to sign up for that email list, I got the stat model coaching program that's going to launch here probably in about maybe a week to 2 weeks. So if you sign up for that email list, you go to the website, or I think there's a link in the description of this video to do that. I'll send this out, be a little bit more detailed, but there's 3 ways to build models. The third way is to find a stat that correlates to winning and is undervalued. It's the same what I did with baseball. So pitching is undervalued. So what I do is pitching is overvalued. Starting pitching is overvalued. So I just don't include it in the model. And for NFL, nobody talks about defense, but it correlates to winning, number 1, and it's extremely undervalued. So if you're looking to kind of get a starting point for NFL, looking at defense is definitely a solid way to go. And again, also to remember, kind of finishing up our talk about NFL, 2-game sample is not significant enough. And I think one of the mistakes a lot of people make in NFL is wagering too soon. And I haven't even wagered anything on NFL. So another positive way to look at that, we have not lost any money on NFL. And there's a lot of people in the hole because it has been an unpredictable 3 weeks, and we'll probably start next week. And that's when the models will start to take shape. But again, a 2-game sample is extremely low to deem that as valid or legit. And even 3, even though I think it's sufficient, it's still a very small sample size, and you still need to approach with caution. NFL is a grind, very difficult to handicap early in the season. All right, let's move on to college football. College football, go ahead and say this too. With college football, our goal with NFL and college football combined for me is going to be 10 units. And with this new soccer model, we're looking to pump out in the next 3 months 10 units. So that would give us 20 units for basically September, October, November, and December. And I think that's very realistic and very doable. We split out, went 2-2 with we went 4-4 in college football. And I got a really good college football video. I'm going to release that later today. Just going to give you some basic, we're going to talk about statistical properties of college football. And I'll go ahead and tell this now on the podcast. Teams that win and cover in college football is 70%. So it's not as high as NFL, but still significant. That means the spread is only going to come into play 30% of the time in college football. So all this hype about getting the best line, the importance of that in the grand scheme statistically, it's not as important as people make it out to be. So with I don't know if I can pull that up. With with college football, we are sitting at, and generally I don't start wagering until week 3. We jumped the shark and wagered in week 2. So we're sitting at 11.9, up 2.06 units. So off to a good start. So really, we're only 8 units left to hit our goal with NFL and college football combined. Now, what's crazy about soccer, the soccer model, since I started tracking it, has had one losing day, which is insane. And I think it's this has been like a 5-year journey creating different soccer models. But I think this model that I have now is probably the best, no doubt. It's had one losing day since I started tracking it. So going into yesterday, it was 15-5. It did have a losing day yesterday, went 0-2. But overall, since we started tracking it, is 15-7. So super, super excited about the possibility of what we can do, especially when all these fall leagues will start, which will probably have lines up for all the normal soccer leagues, probably around, some of them will start here in the next couple of weeks. So I want to make sure for soccer, the sample size is 8. So I want to make sure teams have played at least 8 matches, because I feel like anything less than that's not really valid. Same with NFL. So sample size is important regardless of what sport you're handicapping. So anyway, so that's a wrap for episode 27 of the Underdog Sniper podcast. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in and or listening on Spotify or Apple iTunes. We'll see you guys next Monday, 8 a.m. Peace.